interesting work is being done right now on the endogenous functions. There's a very interesting book just published called Questions for the Lion Tamer. It's about endogenous DMT, and it's relating that to all of these other rather interesting, what you might call physiological states, which have to do with gamma wave activation in the brain, and which DMT can reliably do this.
That clip right there of Dennis McKenna was from the Psychedelica series produced by Ben Stewart on Gaia a few years back. He was talking about Questions for the Lion Tamer 1. That was our initial work regarding tying in altered states of consciousness and endogenous DMT with the gamma wave increase. Since then, we put out Questions for the Lion Tamer 2, Swimming in Electric Ayahuasca. Both books go into the mechanisms of altered states and tying in the potential correlation with endogenous DMT or ayahuasca upregulation. Since then, we put out the DMT Quest documentary out on YouTube for free, no ads. Go ahead and check that out, as well as the Stone Date Meets DMT, a look at evolutionary perspectives. And right now, we're going to be getting into DMT Meets Education, Luminous Education Revolution. Let's get right into it. Brainwaves are rhythmic or repetitive patterns of neural activity in the central nervous system. There's all different types of brainwaves taking place all the time, some of them a little bit more dominant than others, based on things like circadian rhythm and our states of consciousness. The way that brainwaves are measured is via electroencephalography that measures microelectric currents on the scalp of the head. Alterations in these microelectric currents coincide with changes in consciousness. There's mainly 5 major brainwaves that are cited throughout the literature, starting with the bottom, which is the slowest, delta, correlating with dreamless sleep. Slightly faster, you have theta wave, that correlates with dreaming and the in-between state of waking and sleeping. Then you have the alpha wave, correlating with relaxation and a flow state. Above that, you have the beta wave, coinciding with problem solving. And the fastest wave is known as the gamma wave, coinciding with intense concentration. This right here, you might know him as Thomas Edison. He's known as one of the greatest inventors of the 19th century or 20th century. I'm not sure if I'm getting that right. It's a little controversial, I guess, with the whole Tesla relationship. But anyhow, Edison is known for his contributions towards various inventions, including the light bulb. And what's interesting is that when Edison was incapable of utilizing his active problem-solving mind to come up with some of the solutions for his inventions, he would induce a state called hypnagogia, which is the transitional state of consciousness between wakefulness and sleep. The Edison technique to induce hypnagogia was to sit in a comfortable chair while holding onto 2 heavy metal balls, and he would passively focus on the subject or problem that he was having issues solving. And as he would fall asleep, the balls would fall on the ground, make a loud clank, and then he would come up with his moment of insight in order to solve the issue. So basically, he was getting out of his problem-solving brainwave state into a more relaxative state in order to come up with a solution to his issues. However, it wasn't until 2004 when modern neuroscientists actually looked at the neurological correlates of these moments of insight. This right here was a 2004 study that cites that they observed a surge in gamma waves that coincided with the moment of insight. One of the researchers from that study was Dr. John Cunios from Drexel University, who actually published a seminal paper in 2009 titled The Aha Moment, the Cognitive Neuroscience of Insight, in which he would utilize both EEG and fMRI to look deep within the correlates of these aha moments. What he found was that, much like the 2004 study, there was a surge in gamma waves that coincided precisely with the moment of insight. This here is a figure from the study, the 2009 study. This pinkish line represents an alpha wave, and this green line represents the gamma wave. And this arrow down here, the yellow arrow, is basically the moment in which the aha insight took place. So basically what Cuneo saw was that just preceding the spike in gamma, there was a surge in alpha, indicating that there was a deeper sense of relaxation that coincided with the subsequent burst in gamma and the aha moment. What's interesting is that they found that the actual gamma wave spike took place before the person was actively aware of the insight. And using the fMRI, he found that the gamma activity indicates a constellation of neurons binding together for the first time in the brain to create a new neural network pathway. So it seems as though changes in connectivity can coincide with these moments of insight. Similarly, in 2009, there was another team that was unconnected from the Cunios research that also saw gamma insights that correlated, gamma wave bursts that correlated with the insights. And they also found that there was a suppression in the beta wave that coincided with all this. So there was a suppression of the problem-solving mind to get into a higher state of mind, it seems. In 2019, there was a transcranial alternating current stimulation that found that electric stimulation of the brain at the gamma frequency increased the occurrence of eureka moments or aha moments. These stimulations that took place at different frequencies, it didn't have the same effect on increasing the aha moments. So it's more evidence indicating that there is something to this gamma wave burst and moments of insight. This brings us to extreme moments of insight, something like the near-death experience in which a person describes the sensation of maybe floating out of their body or going through a tunnel or maybe having something like a life review. The near-death experiences has been described as transcendental moments of change, that it alters how a person views reality as a whole, changes how they perceive the world to be. So extreme moment of insight. Another extreme moment of insight might be a psychedelic experience, DMT, ayahuasca, 5-MeO, psilocybin, in which a person feels a change in terms of connectivity based on a distinct alteration in perception. Another, I would say, more rare form of extreme moment of insight would be the acquired savant syndrome. This is a fellow named Jason Paget who suffered a traumatic brain injury following an altercation at a bar, and subsequently started to see complex geometric patterns and became very much immersed in math and solving these geometric patterns and tying it in with math. What's interesting is that Jason Paget had no interest in math prior. He was just a party boy. My guy flexing really hard right here, rocking the mullet. No interest in math or geometry, and that completely changed following the brain injury and his recovery. Similarly, there was a man named Derek Amato who became a musical savant of sorts following a traumatic head injury in which he accidentally jumped into the shallow end of a pool. So the research indicates that following cardiac arrest or during the moment of cardiac arrest, there's a surge of gamma waves, global gamma waves throughout the brain. I believe this is a 2013 study out of the University of Michigan. And this was replicated in a 2019 study regarding cardiac arrest and increase in gamma waves in the mammalian model. In 2009, a medical doctor named Lakshmir Chawla would publish case studies regarding the fact that he saw similar EEG activity, gamma surge, in people at the time of death. In 2022, there was a case study of an 87-year-old epileptic patient who is actually hooked up to EEG and just by chance passed away. And when they looked at the data, they also saw a huge surge in the gamma wave. And this case study made global headlines early in February of 2022. So it makes you wonder, in the vein of consistency, and if you can have a little jump or spike in gamma waves that coincides with the aha moment, what is taking place during these near-death experiences when they're seeing a huge global surge and people are having these deep insights into the nature of reality and the potentiality of there being much more. Maybe it's just like a massive aha moment, and these people are having these transcendental experiences during NDEs. Similarly, when people ingest DMT or smoke DMT, they also see a surge in these gamma waves, and the gamma power increases have been correlated with the subjective reports of mystical type experiences. They seem key in terms of the DMT experience. Similar effects have been shown following a 5-MeO ingestion in terms of the gamma wave increase, as well as following ayahuasca ingestion. So it also makes you wonder whether this is pure hallucinatory phenomena based on compounds ingested, or whether people are actually having these transcendental moments of prolonged aha moments that they actually mean something in terms of our connectivity with nature and with others. There's less information regarding acquired savant syndrome, obviously due to the nature of traumatic brain injury inducing them. However, there is some evidence and research indicating that suppression of the left frontotemporal lobe can increase the savant-like skills for normal people. And there is some research indicating that suppression of the left frontal lobe can actually increase the activity of the right frontotemporal lobe. Whether there's a gamma wave surge that correlates with that, that has yet to be, divulged, but that's a discussion for another day. So what about the kids? Obviously, this is DMT and education. So where are we going with this? Obviously, children have a different brain than adults, being that they are in the growth phase. And it would seem as though they might have different brain activity than that of an adult. This was confirmed in a 1998 study out of Japan, in which it was showcased that the gamma wave power actually peaks at the age of 5 and start to degrade from there throughout a lifetime. And this was a 2013 follow-up study in the journal Clinical Neurophysiology, and they saw the same exact thing, where the gamma wave power peaks at the age of 3 to 5 and then starts to degrade thereafter. So you can see here that basically on the left bottom here, the yellow and the white indicates the greater power, and then as you get into the darker colors, the power decreases. So basically you're seeing the peak at 5 years old, and it just continuously decreases over one's lifetime. Interestingly enough, there's also research out of 1999 indicating that serotonin synthesis peaks at the age of 5, and it's actually double that of an adult's. This is figure 3 taken from this specific study, and it's a very similar chart to that of the gamma wave. So what does this have to do with DMT? Well, John Dean, University of Michigan, in 2019, he's now at UCSD, came up with this study, Biosynthesis and Extracellular Concentrations of DMT in the Mammalian Brain. This was an animal study, but what was intriguing was the fact that he found that DMT was actually produced at extracellular levels in the range similar to serotonin and dopamine. As you can see here on the right, in the average concentration in terms of the nanomolars, DMT is right in between dopamine and serotonin. We think that we know serotonin is a mood modulator of sorts, and dopamine is a pleasure modulator of sorts. What DMT is doing within these same ranges, that's a big mystery. So we still have a lot more research to go into understanding what it's doing in those concentrations, but it definitely changed the discussion of endogenous DMT altogether. In addition, the enzyme necessary to synthesize DMT, Dean cites the fact that it was found throughout the cerebral cortex, which is intriguing, being that the cerebral cortex is 80% of the mass volume of the human brain. They also found the enzyme at the choroid plexus, which is a site of cerebral spinal fluid production, which is intriguing, with CSF being a potential distribution medium for neurotransmitters such as serotonin and possibly DMT as well. He found the enzyme at the visual cortex, obviously where visual processing takes place, the hippocampus, as well as the pineal gland. So this is a much bigger discussion than just the pineal gland in regards to DMT synthesis. So this is different. He changed the ball game altogether. This here is a picture of the B-Cappy vine utilized in the ayahuasca brew. What's intriguing is that one of the compounds found in this vine is named harmine, and it plays a key role in preventing the breakdown of DMT, allowing for the prolonged effects of the ayahuasca brew in terms of a person's neurology. This brings us to the concept of endohuasca, because harmine, this same compound, is actually found within humans as well. So it's endogenous to all humans. It was in a 2022 study that was cited. And what was interesting is that they saw that hormone levels were actually double that in people under the age of 60, and then started to drop off significantly once people got to an elderly age. Unfortunately, they didn't look at the levels that for like kids compared to adults, but I would suspect that the levels in kids are probably a lot higher than that of adults. So the DMT children theory that we are positing is the notion that increased endogenous DMT production in children correlates with increased neurogenesis, that's the development of new brain cells, as well as brain development as a whole. The DMT upregulation contributes to greater gamma power. Obviously, it's not DMT only. It would probably be serotonin and potentially other neurotransmitters that contribute to this greater gamma power as well. And this greater gamma power increases opportunity for aha moments based on the data that we cited earlier regarding the aha moments themselves coinciding with the jump in the gamma wave spike. So basically, these kids are just insights in motion. They don't need to necessarily induce a hypnagogia like Thomas Edison did. They're already there in terms of riding the waves of insight to a certain extent. So it makes you wonder whether them spending hours sitting in a classroom taking orders from a teacher for prolonged periods of time is the optimal way to take advantage of their processing power that they naturally have. This brings us to the next question, whether the brain acts as a storage device or a receiver of information. What's interesting is that there's been many theories regarding exactly where memories are stored in the brain. Year after year, decade after decade, there's been different theories as to precisely where memories are stored in the brain, but there is nothing definitive thus far. Even the latest research still has many questions regarding precisely how and where memories are stored in the brain. What's interesting is that there is good evidence indicating that the gamma waves can distinguish true from false memories. So this study right here outlines the fact that when people would have memory recollection and it coincided with the gamma wave surge, it was a true memory. And when they had a recollection that did not have a gamma wave surge, it was a false memory. So this is intriguing in light of understanding how to come up with accurate memory recall. In addition, it's been observed that gamma waves actually weaken with the elderly, and they weaken even further in people with people that have Alzheimer's disease. There's even ongoing research indicating that stimulating the brain with gamma waves can actually prevent and possibly even treat Alzheimer's disease. But that's another conversation for another day. So what's interesting about the Alzheimer's brain is that it's obviously very much physically atrophied compared to the normal brain. And this is cited as being one of the main reasons as to why memory recall is hampered. As you can see, the anatomical differences between the Alzheimer's brain and the healthy brain is very pronounced. So it would make sense if you think that memories are stored in the brain and the brain is severely in a diseased state, therefore it cannot access certain parts of it to recall memory. That would make some sort of sense, I suppose. However, what's interesting is that even people with Alzheimer's and dementia, they seem to, at the moment of death, they have this thing called terminal lucidity. Terminal lucidity is an unexpected return of mental clarity and memory or suddenly regained consciousness that occurs in the time shortly before death in patients with severe psychiatric or neurological disorders. So basically, it's somebody who's nearing their moment of death. They're very sick, very ill, especially if they have dementia or Alzheimer's. They can't remember their family, their friends, or any memories of their lifetime. And just in a flash, they have a moment in which they remember everything. And it almost seems as though they've recovered completely from their disease state. And maybe they have 5 or 10, 20, 30 minutes of complete clarity with their family. The family even thinks that maybe they can turn it around, and then they shortly after there pass away and transition out. So this is a very mysterious aspect of life, and scientists still have major questions as to how it's transpiring. Luckily, there's a medical doctor named Dr. Sam Parnia who's actually actively conducting a 500-person terminal lucidity EEG study, in which he's going to be looking at the brain waves of these patients who have these moments of terminal lucidity. And it's going to be interesting because it's obvious that the Alzheimer's brain doesn't reverse itself to the normal brain and then revert back to an Alzheimer's brain in the moment of terminal lucidity. Something else is happening. I'm suspecting that what we would see is a normalization of the brain waves, which might allow access to certain information that wasn't accessible during the atrophied state. So the question is, if information isn't stored in the brain, then what? This brings me to the electromagnetic field theory of consciousness, which is the theory that it is the end result of all of the electrochemical reactions in the brain, creating an electromagnetic field, which is the basis of consciousness in general as a whole. So it's basically a field perspective of consciousness, not just a neuronal communication. What's interesting is that in 2019, it was found in research at Caltech that humans can actually sense Earth's magnetic field, which is a really weak field in terms of magnetic strength, but it seems as though humans, much like many other animals, can sense this field. So I guess you could say that it helps give some credence to this perspective that our brain's magnetic field is a lot more sensitive than once was thought. Scientists such as Christoph Koch as well as John Joe McFadden have been big proponents of the electromagnetic field theory of consciousness. But I think one of the leading theorists today is Dr. Joachim Kepler, based out of Germany, who has a website called DIWISS, in which he writes various theories about how it all interacts. So this is taken from his website. The distinctive feature of conscious systems in comparison to non-conscious systems is the capacity to access and modulate an inherently sentient background field. This means that the brain produces an individual stream of consciousness by periodically modifying an omnipresent field of consciousness. So basically what he's positing is that our brain waves, our electromagnetic field of the brain, are continuously interacting with the background field, which are contributing to our perception of reality. And this background field is the 0-point field, a real all-pervading electromagnetic background field meeting all basic symmetry requirements. The 0-point field can be thought of as a vibrant, ubiquitous ocean of energy whose initial state is completely disordered, meaning that the individual modes of the field have no correlation with each other. In this form, the 0-point field functions as an omnipresent substrate permanently interacting with the electrically charged constituents of any material system. Basically, he's stating that the brain is consistently interacting with this field and is creating our perception of reality. In the quantum field theory, the vacuum state is the quantum state with the lowest possible energy. So basically right in between the positive and negative charge. You'll never get to zero, but you can get close to it, and that's considered the 0-point field space. These are some of the articles written by Kepler in various journals: Understanding the Brain as a Right Read Head Interacting with an Omnipresent Background Field, Building Blocks for the Development of Self-Consistent Electromagnetic Field Theory of Consciousness. He even is a guest author on a paper discussing DMT and ayahuasca. His contribution is how his theories of consciousness regarding the brain's electromagnetic field and the 0-point field interact under the influence of psychedelics. So it's an intriguing theory for sure that Kepler is positing, that basically our brain is consistently interacting with this field of information and molding our perception of reality. And it operates so fluidly that, it's based on, I guess, the speed of the oscillation and the fluidity of that interaction. So the brain as a read-write head theory of the 0-point theory. The brain's electromagnetic field is in constant interaction with the background 0-point field. The 0-point field contains all information and experiences. Disruption in the brain's ability to generate an electromagnetic field hampers its ability to derive information or experiences from the 0-point field. And there's a possibility that terminal lucidity could occur when the brain's electromagnetic field renormalizes its oscillations. So a person's brain could be theoretically severely atrophied, but if somehow the electromagnetic field is able to normalize, then a person would theoretically be able to tap into the field of information and the memories in order to have those moments of lucidity before they pass away. So now the question is, if memories and information are not stored in the physical brain, can verifiable information be derived without utilizing the traditional senses of sight and sound? This right here is the periodic table utilized in all chemistry courses from high school, college, and beyond. What's interesting is that Dmitry Mendelov, a chemist, actually saw this table in a dream, at least the order of it. So he says, I saw in a dream a table where all elements fell into place. Awakening, I immediately wrote it down on a piece of paper. So it's interesting is that he had a background in chemistry, so it's not like he had no interest in the field and came up with the order of the table, but nevertheless, it came to him in a dream. This here is a Danish physicist named Niels Bohr who came up with the atomic model in a dream. And similarly, a German chemist named August Kekuli came up with the benzene ring in a dream. Not to be relegated just to science, but Paul McCartney came up with the melody to one of his biggest hits, Yesterday, in a dream. And what's interesting is that it was so vivid to him in a dream that he thought that he accidentally stole it from somebody. So he went around asking everyone he knew whether he accidentally stole these lyrics for his song from someone else. And after much digging and prodding, he didn't find anybody who could state that he stole it from them. So he realized that he did come up with them originally in a dream. And also even the series Twilight, it was sparked within a dream. And even Google, Larry Page cites the idea of Google, which came to him in a dream. So what's interesting is that in the dream state, we also see these gamma wave surges that could potentially correlate with these moments of insight while we're not awake. Now back to the kids. Obviously, we've been getting into a lot of neuroscience stuff, but this has to do with the children and really understanding that why we perceive them to be the way that they are, and maybe we need to reframe that. When they're born, they're obviously really helpless. Even when they're a few months old, they're still helpless. When they start to crawl, they're a little bit, they can move around a little bit, but they still need our help in every which way. And then they learn how to walk and waddle, but they're still, they still need guidance along the way. And even when they learn to run, or even learning to talk, learning how to read and write, I think it's because of their small stature and their cuteness and their squeaky voices and their limited vocabulary that we tend to view them as maybe subpar in terms of the realms of intellectual, discourse. I don't think that that's necessarily correct. The way that I view them is that they're basically a clean slate computer connected to the internet via fiber optic cables. Based on their gamma frequency that's so much more robust than us adults, it would seem that as though they have a greater connectivity space and greater processing power. They're like Ferraris in terms of their raw processing speed. In terms of the model of the 0-point field, basically the 0-point field would equate to something like the internet if we want to go ahead and overlay technology with what we believe to coincide with consciousness. And that the gamma wave power equates to the internet connection speed. So the ability to tap into information, their ability to tap into information and tap into intuition and come up with insights is leagues above adults. And because of their limited vocabulary and their short stature, I believe maybe we sell them short. By contrast, adults seem like computers with a bunch of software downloaded onto them, probably full of malware and viruses, and we have a weak internet connection because we have such a weak gamma wave power compared to these kids. So we're like a 1984 Toyota Tercel trying to guide little Ferraris in terms of education. So it makes one wonder once again whether spending prolonged hours in the classroom, getting orders barked at them by the teacher all day long is an optimal way in terms of utilizing their processing power. And there's a possibility that too much emphasis on traditional learning creates an increased beta wave dominance and suppresses the gamma wave power, the gamma wave seeming to be key in terms of connectivity with the field of information. There's a 2021 study regarding mathematical spatial training in children and the effect it has on their EEG. And what they found was that there was an increase in the coherence of the beta frequency following this math training. So it seems to offer some sort of evidence indicating that what happens is that children start to view the world less from an intuitive aspect and more from an analytical aspect when they spend a lot of time in formal education. So this could be a negative effect in terms of the way that they interact with the world, and a suboptimal way of interacting with the world, especially what we know about things like terminal lucidity and the ability to tap into information, even with a not so high functioning neurology. Things like acquired savant syndrome. How did that come about? It wasn't as if he always had that ability within the brain. It seems as though more so the recovery process allowed him to tap in the field to access information to manifest the complex geometric perspective, as well as Derek Amato, who became a musical savant. And similarly, we've seen this with kids, is that young children have been seen to be musical prodigies. And the reason why I think that this is going to be more common than not is because while they might lack the vocabulary to interact, at a college level or a higher education level, they can express their talents and their ability to tap into information in artistic levels that surpass that of adults at very young ages based on their gamma wave frequency and their connectivity to the field of information. So maybe there needs to be more time spent, downtime, allowing them to tap into intuition, allowing their mind to roam and have these aha moments on their own, rather than too much time spent in formal education, because it does seem to be something like a rubber band effect in which getting out of the stress problem solving state, getting into a more relaxative state, helps to foster these sparks of insight, the gamma wave. Even though the kids are already there based on all the research thus far, it seems as though to stress them out, to constantly put them in the problem solving state seemed to be suboptimal. So in terms of cultivating intuition, optimizing education for the future of children, it would seem to be optimal to have a decreased focus on external stimulation and information, not spending prolonged hours with them basically bored in the classroom, not necessarily learning in the most optimal manner. Allocate 20 to 30 minutes per day to focus passively on a concept or idea, and do it in 2 to 3 minute increments. You got to remember these are kids. They have very active minds, very high power gamma minds. So there's no reason to force them to spend prolonged periods of time feeling as if though they're being punished. So I would say do it in small spurts. Allow them to really tap into the field and see what happens. And then have the children write down or draw their insights following these sessions. Like I said, they might not have the vocabulary to go deep into some of the insights, but they might be able to draw some of them. Compare their insights to that of others and any data to support their insights. It's important to go ahead and compare whether these kids have tapped into similar fields of information and some of the overlap to build on bigger ideas. And then with practice, they can better gauge what it feels like to correctly generate answers with intuition. They won't have to rely on consistently the exterior world to validate their answers. So there is the idea that maybe this gamma, drop off that happens right after the age of 5 doesn't necessarily need to happen, even though it seems to be consistent in the research we've seen thus far. In 2012, there was a write-up in Smithsonian Magazine about the Tibetan monk Matthew Ricard, who's been cited to produce gamma waves that have never been seen before in terms of their strength and power. So there's the potentiality that if we foster an education system and a society that is focused on enhancing things like intuition and relaxative states of being, that the gamma power can actually not drop off at the age of 5, but continue over the course of a lifetime. This here is a question an answer from interview with Dr. John Cunios, the researcher from the aha moment, the moment of cognitive neuro insight. In your talk, you mentioned that technology can interfere with developing creative insights. How so? Dr. Cuneo states, the state of your brain when you encounter a problem helps determine how you go about solving the problem. If your attention is focused inwardly on your own thoughts and ideas, then when you encounter the problem, you are more likely to be able to solve the problem with a flash of insight. But if your attention is focused outwardly on the world around you, then you are more likely to try to solve the problem analytically. You might think of this as outsight rather than insight. In the modern world, we are constantly bombarded by emails, text messages, cell phone calls, meetings, and the demand to be available 24/7. This imposes the kind of outwardly directed attention that is antithetical to solving a problem insightfully. I would tend to agree, and that's a big issue in terms of education going forward. It's difficult. I mean, how can we solve this since we're basically in the same situation from grammar school to middle school to high school to college to the adult working environment? Major metropolitan city living, bombarded by mainstream media, bombarded by social media. Obviously, we're living in a digital ocean of influence. So it's a difficult time in human history to maneuver in terms of fostering insight and nurturing insight because we have so much stimulus around us. Maybe it's time to look at the indigenous cultures and take their rituals seriously and not look at them as though they're outdated and there's no reason for them to continue these practices. Maybe they're the ones that actually might be having it correct, and their rituals allow them to cultivate intuition, so they don't have the gamma dropout that we do, and they're actually able to continue this for a lifetime. Because Matthew Ricard showed that this doesn't have to necessarily be the way to live, right? I mean, he's 66 years old, and he showed that the gamma wave surge doesn't have to drop off. And this gamma wave drop off seems to directly coincide with this huge surge in Alzheimer's disease that we're seeing on a global scale. And even worse is the fact that we're seeing early onset dementia, early onset Alzheimer's from people as early as the age of 30 to 50. And this is just increasing year over year. And this could potentially have to do with the lack of the ability to nurture the mechanisms of insight, because insight would seem to coincide with the ability to recall memory and gather information. In addition, depression rates have been skyrocketing throughout the world. And it seems as though there's a correlation between things like depression and eventually developing into Alzheimer's and dementia. So the question is, what can be done? What can be done about this epidemic that we're basically facing right now? I think focusing on the fact that we do have an internal compass and relaying this information to children, allowing them to understand that there is an internal compass. Regardless of the information that we're being bombarded with, we do have an inner knowing of things to a certain extent, especially if we nurture that aspect of ours. I think we can start with the basics, things like breathing properly. We know that breathing is a fundamental rhythm of brain function. We could start with nose breathing. Breathing in through your nose, get those boogers out of your kid's nose. Don't get them mouth breathing. Develop these good habits of breathing through your nose at an early age, because we do know that nasal respiration entrains long-range gamma coherence in your brain. And we need to start these habits from an early age. There's other evidence indicating that mouth breathing is horrible for cognitive function, horrible for oxygen uptake into the brain. I mean, we can go on and on about this data, but I would say just focus on nose breathing from an early age. Create that good habit early on. Also, set aside time to daydream rather than reprimanding a kid for daydreaming. Set aside some time for them to just daydream on their own and let them go into their imagination space for however long they want to be. I mean, to a certain extent, obviously. Keep them away from the junk food, not too much of the junk food, even though obviously they like the sugar high. Make sure that they have access to fresh fruits and vegetables in order to optimize the system. Make sure they have access to fresh air and sunshine in order to maintain their health status. Access to fresh, clean drinking water as well as bathing water. We don't want to pollute their bodies more than there already is in the environment. And then allocate some specific time for mindfulness. And I wouldn't say just meditation, because obviously that could be looked at as punishment for some kids, but it could even just be going for a walk. And maybe the kid, for a minute or two, you ask them to just be silent and ruminate on an issue or an idea. And after the minute or two, you guys can talk about it. And you never know what will come up. But if you allow the kid to really tap into their own capabilities and really tap into that gamma wave information, you never know what kind of astounding thoughts that a kid might have. And in doing all of this, this will contribute to a better sleep pattern for the kids, which will obviously lead to healthier and happier kids, which obviously leads to healthier and happier adults, and ultimately healthier and happier elderly, which would change society. Hopefully, we won't have to be on this gamma wave degrading scale, and we can go ahead and continue peaking as we age. I think that's the way that it needs to be. However, there's a warning. This is Dr. Brenner from the series Stranger Things on Netflix, and somehow he had the insight that it was children that had the capabilities to do paranormal things or supernormal things, probably based on the gamma waves. Obviously, I'm joking. This is a Netflix series, but it's just citing the fact that let's not be militant about developing intuition or developing moments of insight in children. Let's make sure that we keep it fun and foster a happy upbringing. Now for the bonus section. This right here is medical Dr. Robert O. Becker, who wrote the book The Body Electric, one of my favorite books. His core research was surrounding the regeneration capability of salamanders. However, he would look into alterations in consciousness. However, he wouldn't use EEG, which, by the way, was developed by Hans Berger to create a device to measure for telepathic abilities, but that's another discussion altogether. Dr. Becker would utilize the direct current measurement. So basically, it was just measuring the direction of the current in the brain. He had two measurements at the front of the brain and the back of the brain. Basically, what would happen during the awake state, the energy would go from positive to negative, meaning that there would be a negative frontal potential at the front of the brain, and during the asleep state, it would flip, where the direction of the current would go the opposite manner. And what he saw was that during things like hypnoanalgesia, in which a person was put in a very sedated state via audio instructions, and they wouldn't feel pain, he would see a distinct change in their brain. And this video right here is of hypnoanalgesia utilized to remove a wisdom teeth. So basically, this person has no chemical anesthesia, and they're having their wisdom teeth removed just by being in the trance state.
To be in full control of your mouth in terms of allowing metal to.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable what the human brain and body is capable of when in altered states of consciousness. So the reason why I'm citing this regarding Becker's research is that what he saw when he was measuring via the direct current measurement is that instead of being a positive or negative on the measurement aspects, it was basically zero. And to me, this indicates that maybe there was a tighter coupling with the 0 point field during these trance states or altered states of consciousness, allowing these strange abilities like being able to remove a tooth without feeling any pain transpire. So that's just a hypothesis that I have. Now for total recall, we're about to get really crazy. This fella right here is a medical doctor named Dr. Ian Stevenson, and he was doing research out of the University of Virginia for many years. Ian Stevenson did research regarding the concept of memory recall or reincarnation, in which young children would somehow recall memories of lifetimes that did not occur in their current lifetime. Basically, you had young children who would discuss having vivid recollections of someone else. Stevenson would go into public records and look to verify the facts that the kids were bringing up. And he was able to come up with thousands of case studies, very detailed by nature in terms of, I guess, reincarnation. I guess that's the way we're going to want to call it. So he's even had some, I guess, case studies in which there were birthmarks that were very much in line with the way that the person died in a past life. So this one here is of a young Indian man or Indian child who recalls a past life in which he was shot in the chest, and he has a birthmark of I guess hypopigmentation that coincides exactly where the man was shot, alongside many other details. This right here is another case study in which Ian Stevenson was digging into regarding a Turkish boy who recalls being shot in his right ear in a past life, and alongside many other details that coincide with the past life. And then he has a birth deformity to coincide with it. And this right here is of a young child who had his hand mangled by some blades in a past life, and he failed to be able to grow his hand in the current life, alongside many other details. So Stevenson recalls many of these case studies in his book Reincarnation and Biology, as well as his other books. But it's intriguing stuff. Dr. Jim Tucker, also at the University of Virginia, followed in his footsteps. He's featured in Surviving Death on Netflix, episode 6. You could check that out. And he has written some books on it as well. And they have thousands of case studies in terms of the details of these kids. And what's interesting regarding all this and what I'm presenting thus far is the fact that in the Alzheimer's brain, the inability to recall, period, just degrades to such a high degree, seems to occur when the gamma power just really drops off. And there's a possibility that the person is just incapable of tapping into the 0-point field, the field of information, the ability to recall. It's all one and the same. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have kids at the age of 3 to 5 that have huge gamma power. And basically this seems to be the peak time with which kids are able to recall past lives. And what's interesting is that both Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker cite that these same kids who talk about the past lives in great detail, once they reach about the age of 7 or 8, they don't have the ability to recall anymore. Sometimes they even forget altogether that they even talked about a past life. And it seems interesting in the light of that once they reach the age of 7 or 8, their gamma wave is no longer at its peak. So maybe they have the inability to tap into that depth level of information. And what's interesting is that people that have near-death experiences, psychedelic experiences, or even long-time meditators, and even people that have been put into trance states, all seem to have some sort of openness towards the concept of past life recollection, potentially coincided with a huge surge in gamma waves that they don't have during normal waking consciousness. So maybe there is something to this concept of an afterlife, or the existence of a soul or something after bodily death. Maybe the soul is something like a ball of magnetic energy or something like that is housed within the body and then quickly leaves the body. Something like this Winnie the Pooh floating out once we pass away and going back to the 0-point field and figuring out from there what we have to do next, if we have to come back to Earth to redo some lessons that weren't learned or whatnot. I don't know. It seems like a very complicated field of scientific research that's just the surface is being scratched upon, but it's intriguing nonetheless. So hopefully in the future we can get more answers and greater clarity to these mysteries of life. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. I'd like to thank Dr. Edith for her great advice and everything she's contributed thus far to the world regarding human potential and her wellness programs. We featured her in the 3rd episode of the DMT Quest podcast. She's even been featured on United Shades of America with comedian Kamau Bell, in which she visited her wellness center in San Francisco and got some work done. However, right now, Edith's main focus is the Luminous Education Revolution platform. She's currently in phase 3 in terms of developing the most advanced platform in terms of children's education. She's going to be involving some of the concepts that I presented thus far and much more. So I'm imploring that we all support her. So the next step is to support her via donations. Every.org is going to be the platform we're going to be utilizing to support her Luminous Education platform. You could find the link in the description of this video. It'll give you all the details in terms of how you can support the Luminous Education platform. Going to be very important going forward for conscious parenting and much more. The DMT Quest, stay tuned. I hope you like this presentation, and we have a lot more in store for you. Thank you.